Hey, we're back with more live from the Heartland. It's the 11th of February. We're down here at 26 East Pearson, and we're about to introduce our next guest, but first I want to tell you a couple of things. First of all, Katie, what was Lauren's URL from the Jazz Chicago?
www.jazzinchicago.org. That's how you reach Lauren Deutsch, Jazz Institute of Chicago, all the good programs that Lauren just told us about. Again, www.jazzinchicago.org.
I'd like to mention that there will be the second ever Carry Onward benefit supporting progressive radio. That would be us, the Live from the Heartland show. And there'll be some jazz at it. There'll be plenty of blues, rock and roll.
An incredible lineup.
We have a great lineup, and I'm not even going to go into who all the people are, but there'll be lots of music, camaraderie, and great music to resist by. That's going to be February 26th, 3 to 7 p.m. at the Red Line Tap.
1 week from tomorrow.
Yeah.
2 weeks from tomorrow.
2 weeks from tomorrow. And we'll let you know more about it. And if you would like to, we're just going to let you know more about it.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Jeff Smith is amongst us. We turned him into a filmmaker for the last little while. He was filming the first half of the show. Nothing like live radio, as Lauren, who's now behind the camera, just mentioned. Jeff, you and I go back to quite a ways. I think that we first met each other maybe when the 49th Ward was electing its first independent alderman.
You wouldn't work on the McGovern campaign together?
About that time. I worked on the second McGovern.
Yeah, maybe it was the McGovern. I can't remember, but I do what I know. What I want to share with our audience is that you and I worked together on the Harold Washington campaign when you were helping coordinate the 49th Ward at one point.
And lo and behold, you're running for mayor of Evanston.
Okay, that's a quick.
Well, we just got a lot to share with us, Katie, so
yes,
we got to get right at it.
What is your? Let's. Thanks for being here, Jeff. First of all,
it's my pleasure. This is like a family reunion.
Really?
We may have met even earlier than you think, because one of the first dates I ever had with my now wife Nancy was in the fall of 1976, where we came down to the Heartland Cafe. That was before I even went off to law school and came back and settled in Rogers Park.
Dear to me are those earliest at the Heartland first dates. Yes. Many marriages tell me that which warms the cockles of my heart, whatever cockles.
Brown rice.
Yeah, sure.
That was a big night out for us.
I hear you, babe. Brown rice is a big night out for me these days. Jeff, where did you grow up? First of all, where did you come from?
Well, where did I come from? I get asked that a lot.
I bet.
I'm somebody nobody sent, right? So I was born in Chicago, but I primarily grew up, as they now define it, in Park Ridge. My folks bootstrapped their way into the suburbs so that I could have
the best education.
The educational opportunities they didn't have. My dad dropped out of junior college so that he could start earning a paycheck. They were actually living in a mobile home while my mom was pregnant with me, and we ended up first of all in an unincorporated part of Leyden Township. The first house I remember, we didn't have sidewalks. We had a gravel road and we had ditches out in front of the yard. So I guess it was kind of post side of the tracks for Park Ridge. But I lived about 7 blocks from Hillary, and we swang on the same swing sets and went to the same schools. So she was a little ahead of me.
I like swang. I think it's
we're swanging together.
I love that swang on the same.
Well, you're swinging now up in Evanston. You are. I'm looking. All of a sudden, I see that you have entered the mayoral race up there, and I understand there are 5 candidates. First of all, why
Folks,
should
that all of a sudden was 2 months ago? So that's when we started looking to make sure Jeff got on the show.
You could say it was 40 years ago, because I came to Evanston as a teenager, and in the fall of 1976, the same time as I was meeting Nancy and chowing on tofu at the Heartland, I was knocking on doors of dorms for Ab Mikvah, trying to get him into Congress. That was the big 211 vote landslide victory, and it taught me a lot about grassroots organizing, and more importantly, the concept that even one person can make a difference in politics. And
Those are honorable street cred
and
for a progressive.
I probably have a diary for that time saying, hey, some student should run for mayor of Evanston someday.
Because Soglin was doing it right about that time, or had done it by then.
Well,
in Madison?
Madison, yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Well, it's always been an untapped potential.
right.
And there's been surges up and down. The past decade, there hasn't been as much attempt to get students involved, because if you were from Iowa or Ohio and you were going to Northwestern University, the Obama campaign wanted you to vote
Still
in
be
Ohio or
registered.
Iowa.
That's right.
Whereas back then, when I started out, Illinois was more of a swing state. In fact, it was very much a swing state, whichever way Illinois went. Swang.
Well, let me ask you this, Jeff.
So went the nation.
If you are fortunate enough to win the vote up there in Evanston, what can a mayor do up in Evanston? I understand you have a city manager,
Correct. Since
so you can
1952.
break a tie. You can also be inspirational, make connections to other towns and other issues. What is your plan as the mayor of Evanston?
Well, the mayor can veto in Evanston. It's relatively easy to override, but the mayor can still veto. The mayor can introduce legislation. The mayor appoints people to important boards and commissions, like the Zoning Board of Appeals, which has a little more power than the advisory board in the 49th Ward. It's mandated by law, and there's a plan commission that if anybody wants to, say, build a 40-story skyscraper in downtown Evanston, that would be a planned development, and it would have to go before the plan commission before it even came to the city council. So the mayor is instrumental in appointing the characters and personalities that'll help shape the tone for city planning. The mayor, as you said, can also be inspirational. Evanston is part of a major media market. There's a lot of journalists that live there. There's a lot of opinion makers, and a town with the intellectual capital and the political capital and the capital of Evanston
And the Women's Temperance Union.
Right.
Christian
Shouldn't be a caboose that simply supplies blindly vote fodder for whatever lesser of two evils is foisted upon us. When Barack Obama wanted to run for the U.S. Senate, he came up to Evanston, I think, 5 times. I co-hosted a coffee for him, and I went to another one, a few blocks north in South Wilmette, and he certainly courted that vote. And that is the kind of thing we'd like to see. If you want a more visionary and progressive politics in Illinois, you want Evanston putting some of its stamp on that politics.
How does that exact sentiment fly with the audiences that you've been talking to?
I think it resonates pretty well.
Mhm.
Whether they think I'm the person to do it or not, that'll ultimately be up to the voters, or whether we can get that message out. Again, you have limited channels, and thank you for having me on this show.
Well, how is it? I mean, you are a person that is closest to us in sort of philosophy and demeanor and culture.
Demeanor?
Yes, well, we can be rather raw and blunt, right?
This guy is much more polished than we are, Katie.
Well, I should hope so.
I clean up well.
But, God, did I just forget my question?
You did.
Um,
Well, see
I
if you
just-
had had 2 or
okay,
3
all right.
questions, and you would have remembered.
I want to know how it is that we get into politics as individuals and not do what is currently coming from the White House, this egotistical, me-based kind of thing. I mean, we see it a little bit in Chicago too. We've got a mayor who just told everybody to take a chill pill because that's the way he approaches politics. How do we get out of our own way when we're trying to be leaders in this era?
Well, I'm
That's
guessing.
a pretty weird question.
No, it's a great question.
That's a great one, Kate.
I'm guessing part of the reason you had me on this show is because you know that I've said many, many times if the people lead eventually, the leaders will follow. I'm, one of those change comes from the bottom up. I've voted only Democratic and in Democratic primaries my whole political life, but my thinking and receptiveness expands beyond that. And I'm from the Warren Sanders, Howard Dean wing of the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, if you will. But I'm not really formally religious, but I've been quoting a New Testament verse throughout this campaign from Matthew.
Being in
that's,
politics will get your religion.
It will, and my formal religion is probably backslider. But in Matthew it says, "He who would be a chief must first be a servant," and that's a different style of governing than the current occupant.
Number 45, we
Right.
refer to him as.
Now, this is not your first run in politics.
It's
You
not. No.
weren't you the Democratic committee chairman or something until Cal Sutker knocked you off? What was
Well, it
that?
was the other way around.
Yeah, he
Okay.
knocked out.
Well,
Cal opened up.
When I was so young, I didn't know any better.
Yeah, that's right.
It's sort of like that when the cartoon character walks off the cliff, and because he hasn't looked down, doesn't realize that, and he keeps
There
on
you
walking.
go. There you went.
I ran against the chairman of the state Democratic Party, which is the same office that Michael Madigan now holds, that people forget about because of his visibility as speaker. And nobody told me I had no chance, and so we went out, and in the phrase attributed to Gandhi, first they ridicule you and then you win. I'm shorthanding that. So, but that was so long ago, Michael, that if it was pre-internet, it doesn't count, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but you
It
won.
didn't exist.
But you
won.
did serve
I
as
did
the,
serve 4 years,
as the committeeman.
and even though it's an
Right.
unpaid party office, I was probably out at 10, 15 meetings a week for
Sure.
4 years, and people
Did you
come
make
up
a
to you.
dent?
I think we did.
Yeah.
I think we helped change the complexion of Illinois, because Vince DiMuzio, who was the first non-Cook County chair in a long time, really worked on starting to build up a downstate base for the party. And so for a brief while we had an influence. Then the Empire strikes back, and Gary LaPel succeeded Mr. DiMuzio, followed by Mr. Madigan.
Followed by Madigan. The substance of your campaign, I know some of your issues because we have the same environment, arts, what we were just talking about, and then others who have, I'm sure, asked you, as they do whenever a progressive really runs in a local office, why would somebody running for local office be talking about war, peace, military spending, etc.?
There's a couple ways in which that relates, and it's not just because I've worn a peace button and marched in D.C. or down the streets of Chicago against the MX missile, but it does help, I think, in these times that you have somebody for whom it's not their first right-wing rodeo. You have to know how to speak against it. The military spending in this country has been unaddressed. I think the left and the progressive movement was somewhat silenced because they didn't want to embarrass Obama.
Yeah.
But you can't talk about the crisis that states and cities are in particular in Illinois, without talking about the $5 trillion
Right.
that we've spent blowing up in the sand and in places that most Americans can't find on a map. We used to have this thing called federal revenue sharing, and the federal government would send money to the states that we could spend on things like roads and bridges and the infrastructure that you were talking about with Lauren, and so that's not happening. A second dimension of that is there's a violence problem in America, in Chicago, and to some extent in Evanston. It's not as bad in Evanston. Rahm Emanuel would kill, figuratively, to have Evanston's problems. We get ourselves, understandably, in a state of anxiety in Evanston if we have a rough incident, like we've had some.
We've had a few,
We've
yeah.
had a few recently, but it's not Laquan McDonald. It's not Ferguson. And in the case of one where somebody was wrongfully arrested, you had the chief of police immediately apologizing and the city manager immediately apologizing. But the way this relates to war is, how do you teach peace? How do you teach kids not to be violent if the federal government, you remember Dukakis saying the fish rots from the head down, if the government that is at the very top of power in this country basically says it's okay to kill people as a solution to problems. It's okay to press a button in a room here in the States, and somewhere on the other side of the planet, somebody is hit by a drone and a missile, and then, oh, there might be some collateral damage. There have been more civilians killed by some counts in the last 15 years of war by the United States than were killed in the United States on 9/11. How do you teach peace if you have an ethic of perpetual war?
Right.
And so I think that it directly relates to the violence we're seeing throughout the country, and we'd have an easier time teaching kids not to pull the trigger if we weren't doing it so often as a society.
Jeff, I know you've been real busy, and just in talking to other people up in Evanston, there are 5 candidates for mayor, and there are numerous forums that people are attending, and people are coming out for them. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's a democratic process in general that we should acknowledge, that people seem concerned and very much interested in this race.
We had an overflow crowd at the Civic Center about a week ago at the League of Women Voters Forum, and it's great that people are coming out. I applaud that folks feel a sense of citizenship and wanting to do that.
Yeah.
It's a little frustrating because we get limited to these 90-second, 120-second answers.
Sure.
And
There's 5 of you.
there's a false equivalency created. Anybody could dance on an issue for 90 seconds, whereas you might have spent 10 years studying municipal budgets or mass transportation, and you're still only going to have 2 minutes to talk about it.
Well, like yourself. And you did mention that of all these forums, no one asks or very little is talked about in terms of taxes and the budgeting process.
There's some things that I think we've had 8 forums yet, and I don't think there's been a single question about the environment. I don't think there's been a straightforward question about city spending, as in what would you cut if, for example, we did lose funds because of our welcoming city status, and those are legitimate questions to ask.
Right.
A key part of my platform is that Evanston needs to lead on the environment simply because we can. I believe that everybody needs to be leading on the environment. We've got climate deniers in the White House. You know, I've been working on these issues. I've got campaign brochures from 25 years ago where I was talking
Throw
about...
them away, Jeff. Let's make some new
about
ones.
what we
Nah, eBay.
We called it global
The
warming back
collectors.
then, right? And
We did.
But I was out in front of that, and it was hard to get traction on it, and you wonder, what's it going to take? Is it going to take
God.
Greenland sliding into the ocean?
Yeah, I mean, that question, you wonder what it's going to... Don't say that even, because it's so much nearer to us.
Well, my point is that at every level of government, we now need to have people who are champions for the planet. I'm now a grandfather, as you may or may not know.
Congratulations.
You
I know
remember
the
my
feeling.
bringing my Jody as a infant in arms to the Heartland.
Sure.
So all these lines we've been using for years about for our grandkids are now a little more real to me.
Very real.
And it's just, I feel it with so much passion that we've got to be fighting for a sustainable planet. And if you can't do it in a place like Evanston, where can you do it? To me, the mayor of Evanston really should be an environmental champion. Liz Tisdale has helped move the city in that
The former
direction.
mayor, the
She's
current mayor, rather.
the soon-to-be former mayor.
Right.
She's still there.
Right,
And
sorry.
one of the 3 things she says she's looking for in a mayor is somebody who really understands sustainability. And I've worked on pretty much every Evanston environmental issue that there is. I was a founding member of Citizens Greener Evanston. We helped push to get them to aggregate their electricity purchases and get them from renewable sources. I've worked on mass transit plans, lakefront issues, food and water.
Jeff, how's the race looking? If you were a betting man or woman, how would you say it's going to turn out? I don't know. The only real press I've seen on the race is a wonderful article about you in the Daily Northwestern, and that was on Tuesday the 7th, and it's called Around Town. Jeff Smith runs for mayor on Progressive Platform. And added to that question, because I like to ask more than one, is there much a formidable student base that will come out and vote?
there's a large student population that historically doesn't vote in municipal elections. It's a latent power. There's 10,000 students or student age citizens in Evanston, and if they ever organize, but I've seen precincts that have 1,000 people registered that have a turnout of 7 in an election. If even if even half of the students who voted in the last presidential election turned out, it would have an impact, and I think it would be a positive impact because nobody should be marginalized. Students everywhere should be heard, and if you want people to be involved in democracy, you got to start early. Voting is a habit, and it's got to be inculcated. In terms of to answer the horse race aspect of the question, we feel pretty good. We got into the race a little later than some other candidates, but I probably started out with as good name recognition as some have had to try and
build up,
purchase.
Is it amicable? Are people playing well together in Evanston?
Evanston is a small town, or maybe more accurately 3.5 small towns,
Yeah,
so it's hard not to bump elbows and have overlaps. I knew all these candidates before I got into the race. I probably had a drink with all of them. 2 of them have been in my living room, and vice versa. So it's not a matter of personal differences. There are some policy differences, and then there's just some differences in background. What I think I bring to this race is having lived in different addresses, apartments, etc., in 5 of the 9 wards in Evanston, plus 8.5 years just south of Howard Street, so I've seen Evanston from many different perspectives, even though I've spent most of the last 40 years within downtown, and I've just heard from thousands of voters between knocking on doors, getting petition signatures, going to hundreds of meetings. It's a different perspective that I can bring, and I would be a different kind of mayor than some of the others. We've had a number of issues in Evanston where people had to question authority and had to fight City Hall, and I had been on the side of the people, if you will, in many of those, such as trying to save the libraries or trying to save the Civic Center from being sold and turned into a subdivision, and I just hadn't seen, even though I like them and have enjoyed having a drink or a handshake with them, the other candidates, I hadn't seen them on the side of the people in those battles.
How are you asking people to help out? What can people do?
In Evanston, yard signs are important. We will be doing even more canvassing as hopefully the weather gets a little warmer, and this has been an unusually warm winter.
Yeah, really, I was
going forward. If they can go to the website, Jeff4 with the number 4, Jeff4Evanston.org, that's 4 as in 4 years, for you, and fill out the contact form. Small checks always help. $27 is a good number.
Yep.
Add a 0 and that's a good number.
Jeff for Evanston, Jeff with number 4, Evanston.org.
Jeff4Evanston.org.
All right. And is there an event that, or an upcoming forum that you might want to share with us? I know there's been like 8, but Election Day, for those of you who haven't mentioned it, is February 28th.
Right. The big forums are largely
Past.
over. There's the Rotary is going to have one very late. I think that's a week and a half from now. There's going to be an event at Temperance Brewery.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that name. What a brilliant thing on their part.
Well, it's like we have Fuse Spirits as well, which
that's also great.
stands for Francis E. Willard.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there's a lot of digs at Prohibition in Evanston, but there's going to be a multi-candidate event at Temperance, I think next Wednesday.
All right. Jeff Smith, best of luck to you.
Thanks so much.
And I hope the voter turnout is higher than it's ever been, for the sake of Evanston.
Work those students, stand on those corners.
Thanks.
Indeed. Lauren Deutsch, Jeff Smith, thank you both for being on the show. We want to thank everybody who makes this show possible. Lenormand Weiss, Nolan Chen, Morgan Lonergan.
Tom Clark, Reed Himes.
Yeah, that's
Get them all in there, Kate.
Yeah, we'll be back here next week with a brand new show. And what, Michael? Do good in the world. The world
needs all the good you do. All power to the people. Over and out.